Hi everyone! So today I have for you a book unhaul, and this is the first unhaul I have of the year. So I have quite a few books to talk about with you today, and I was debating whether or not to do this before or after my official bookshelf tour, because I actually have quite a lot of empty space on the shelves, which is fantastic. But I was like, well, I mean, if I have the space, might as well just keep these books around. But then I decided, if I don't love these books, or if, I don't love the edition of that book, do I really want to show it in my library tour? Or do I just want to part with it now? So I decided on the latter. So let's talk about all the books that I'm planning on unhauling, saying goodbye to, and hopefully we'll find some new homes that love them more than I do. First is The Plot by Jean Corlitz. This is one that I recently finished. I listened to this one via audio and I thought it was just very average. I finished it, so it kept me intrigued throughout. I definitely wanted to see what the ending was going to be, but this is one that it took so long to build up the story and to finally get going that by the time we did get going, I had already kind of lost most of my interest. If you don't know, it follows a character who is an aspiring author. He teaches writing classes at this local university, and one of his students shares with him the plot of his not yet written book, and it's like one of the most unbelievably clever plots this teacher has ever heard. It's brilliant, and he knows it's going to be a bestseller if it gets written. And that student passes away, and so the writing teacher decides to write the plot himself, but then he starts to get some mysterious notes and messages that someone knows his secret and knows that he stole this book, and things ensue from there. Everything I just told you to pitch the book takes about halfway through the book to finally get going. So that was 50% of the book, and then the last 50% is where you start to learn more information. So it's really slow, and I just didn't find it super memorable. It did have quite a clever twist. I did like some of the parts of the ending, but not enough to make this a favorite or anything, so I'm gonna part with it. It was a 3-star, it was fine, but nothing I need to keep on my shelves or ever reread. The next one I have is actually one that my husband read, and it's Matthew Perry's memoir, and I've heard a lot of people read this one, so I've heard a lot about it, and it's one that when my husband read it, we're both big Friends fans. I feel like anyone going into this book is probably a big Friends fan, or is aware of Friends. So he was expecting a little bit more insight into that behind the scenes, that journey, but it was much, much more focused on Matthew Perry's drug addictions and alcoholism and mental health struggles. And that's something that he kind of shared with me, the most interesting parts of the book. And so since I've already kind of talked to him about this book, I don't feel like I necessarily have to just read it for myself. I understand, I think, what he's going for here, and kind of got the high level Spark Notes version of it. And it's something that I think is definitely worth sharing and reading, but it's just something that I probably won't read myself now that I've heard about it from him. So I'm going to give this to a new home. The Last Blade Priest by W.P. Wiles. This was one that I was sent for review and unfortunately just was not very engaged with and ended up not finishing. I just did not find anything interesting about kind of the world or the politics or the characters. It was very slow, it was kind of dense, just not for me. I could tell that it wasn't going to be one that I really enjoyed. It's a standalone, it is quite chunky, so I wasn't engaged really at all by page 200 and was like, I think this is probably just not my kind of book. So I did put it down and will be passing it along to my local Goodwill. Now, The Coward and the Warrior, these were two books that I did finish, And I did enjoy overall. I gave them 3.5 stars, but they weren't favorites. I do really like Stephen Aryan's writing style, but these two stories are very much quest type fantasy books, and I don't personally love quest type stories where you're just following the band of characters as they go from one checkpoint to the next to get to that final destination. That's just not my favorite kind of fantasy to read about, unless you have like unbelievable characters or like a super unique world. There was cool magic in this duology, and some of the characters I did like, but just not enough to absolutely fall head over heels in love with this duology. That being said, I do plan on checking out Stephen Aryan's backlist and his newest release, so I definitely liked his writing style enough to keep checking out some more books, but this particular duology, it's not one I'm going to reread, so I figured I could pass it along to someone else who may absolutely love it. The next one I have is It Rides a Pale Horse by Andy Marino. This one sounded so interesting. It was like a horror fantasy, and I am like all about some fantasy horror. That is always kind of a buzzword for me. However, the writing style was so different and so unique. I just knew pretty early on it was not going to be for me. I really didn't understand anything that was happening, didn't understand what was going on, and pretty early on in this book was like, yeah, this isn't it for me, but it might be for someone else. It does say it is a terrifying novel of obsession, creation, and the shocking actions we'll take to protect those we love, all set in a small town filled with dark secrets. So like that pitch sounded great. It just, the writing style itself was just not for me. But if you like super unique, flowery writing, very metaphorical, you might really like this. So check it out if that sounds interesting to you. One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I did read this one and I thought it was good. I enjoyed it while I was reading it, and then upon finishing it, I kind of immediately forgot everything about it. So that's not a great sign. And originally I was actually planning on keeping this one around because I did overall enjoy it, and I was interested when I initially finished it, picking up the sequel. However, because I very shortly after finishing it kind of forgot everything, I know I would have to reread this before I continued on with the sequel, and I'm not going to reread this. I'm just not. It is kind of a dark gothic fantasy that has really cool magic involving like cards, and if you possess these cards, you get certain abilities and such, and some of the magic stuff was really cool. The romance itself, like there is a pretty big subplot, romantic subplot. It was fine. It wasn't like my favorite thing ever, but it was there and it was fine. And it just felt a little bit young as well. I think this is adult fantasy, but it did read a little bit younger with the main character and how she acted. So it just wasn't like my favorite. And obviously, if I forgot that much of it right after finishing it, it's probably just not for me. So I'm just gonna say goodbye, and hopefully someone will find this and will absolutely love it. Notorious Sorcerer by Davinia Evans. This is one that I gave like 100 pages and was like, I don't know what's going on. It was very, very confusing, but not in like a fun way where you're figuring out the mystery with the main character or something like that. No, it was just like confusing. I don't think on purpose. So I was like, I don't think I'm supposed to be confused, and this is not keeping my attention at all, and I don't know what's going on. So this was another one that was just like not for me. It's like, okay, moving on to something that is going to be a little bit more engaging for me personally. So I mean, it had like a cool concept, and I have seen some people really enjoy this. So I think it has like a heist plot too. It's like an adult fantasy with a heist plot, but the magic was so weird. It was like parallel dimension type magic, but I I didn't really get it. I didn't get it. I'm sorry. Next one I have is Dowry of Blood, which I did read and I did really enjoy, and I'm not getting rid of this because I didn't like it. I'm getting rid of it because I have the special edition from my Fairy Loot box, and I no longer need the ARC copy of it because I have a new beautiful edition for it. So I get to pass this along to hopefully someone else who will absolutely adore it. Next two I have are for very similar reasons as a Dowry of Blood, and that is Strange the Dreamer, Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. I'm so glad I'm like sending this out into the world to hopefully find a new home that will love them as much as I do. I got beautiful new editions from Owl Crate for these two books, so I no longer need the paperbacks. I'm so happy. I really wanted beautiful hardcovers of these two books because this duology is amazing. It's a YA fantasy duology, and it's just so magical, beautiful, emotional. It's heavy, but it's whimsical. It's just beautiful. So I love this duology, and I really wanted some really pretty editions of it. And I finally got my hands on some, so yay. I can pass along these paperbacks now. The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Niveau. This is a novella, and it is the first in a big series of novellas, actually. I read it and it was fine. It was fine, but the writing style was quite like flowery, pretty, and it just, novellas for some reason, they just don't do much for me. Like it had some cool concepts, but I just feel like none of them got explored to the amount that I would love to see them explored. So I never felt super connected to anything that was going on. It was just so short that I'm like, I don't think I'm a fan of novellas. I really don't. There's only one I've absolutely loved, and it's Ring Shout by P. Jelly Clark. That one's amazing. But yeah, novellas in general, just I think there's not enough time given for me to like absolutely fall in love with them. So yeah, unfortunately, this one, it was fine. It just wasn't a favorite, and I won't continue with the series. Gallant by VE Schwab. This is the first VE Schwab. Well, no, I got rid of her middle grade book too, but I usually love VE Schwab, but Gallant, it had no plot, no character development. It was all about the atmosphere and setting, and I'm just not a fan of that type of story. I need something a little bit more going on, something. And this had like nothing, so unfortunately it did not work for me. I will be passing it along. It's a beautiful edition. It's the UK hardcover that I absolutely love, and I even think it's like illustrated as well. Like it has cool pages inside and stuff, and it's got really cool end papers. So this is like a really cool edition. So hopefully someone picks it up and loves it. Ithaca by Claire North. I wanted to get more into Greek mythology and retellings in general, and this one, it was all the writing style and the choice of who the narrator was that just did not work for me. Following the story of Penelope of Ithaca, the famed wife of Odysseus, but the narrator of the story is someone completely unrelated to the story, and it's very jarring how it's told because you like switch between all these characters and what's going on with these characters from one paragraph to the next. So it's like super, it's just a very odd reading experience because of that, and I just didn't really care for it. And it also had some like modern language tied in there that like kept taking me out of the story, so it just didn't really work for me with the writing style and like the choice of narrator and perspective. And then finally, such a big bummer, Infinity Gate by M.R. Carey. This is one I was really looking forward to. I thought it had a ton of potential to be like a favorite for me. It takes the idea of the multiverse and it's like building up this sci-fi story around it. Like it's pitched as like the war for the multiverse. And the first like 200 pages were amazing. It was like exploring this whole idea of the multiverse, the science behind it, the rules behind it. So interesting. And then it totally switched cast of characters and focus after like that first chunk of the book to someone totally new, a couple people totally new to the story. We were no longer following the same characters we had been, and the conversations all of a sudden switched from like multiverse to AI, which is fine. I like AI conversations, but the way it was executed, it was just not working for me at all. I completely lost interest after I knew like we weren't going back to the original characters for a while. I kept reading hoping we would switch back to the original perspectives or the original focus of the story, and it kept going with these new characters that I didn't care about and this new conversation that I just didn't like as much as the previous one. So I was just so bummed that the focus of the story wasn't what I was expecting it to be. So this did not work for me, unfortunately. Super bummed. But if it sounds interesting to you, you should give it a go, because I think it has a ton of potential and maybe it will work for you better than it worked for me. Super cool ideas in this. Those are all of the books that I'm unhauling right now. Did you see any that you have any thoughts on that you've read before? What did you think of them? Leave those comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to, and if you want more information about exclusive content from me and how to further support the channel, you can always check out my Patreon in the description box down below. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye.